We're back, and this time we are diving into some pretty serious parent group, which is a free book on a group on Facebook where we get together and share really robust strategies and tools on anything from how to motivate your kids to how to manage really big emotions when they come up and navigate them in a way that's super healthy and encourages everybody to learn and grow from tough moments, etc. And it's all based on research that I've done and others have done, really trying to get at this core question of like, how do we build resiliency in ourselves, in our children, and in our whole family system? So when folks join my group, I ask them, what is the hardest thing that you're working on right now that you would like the most support with? And here are some things that folks have mentioned for this month's cohorts group of parents who have just joined the group. We've got about 25 new folks. Some of the top questions included, how do you win your child's cooperation instead of being a task manager? How do I help my kid, deal with this feeling of social isolation that they're experiencing? How do I motivate them to do their schoolwork virtually when it seems like they're just not interested? How do I create more structure to support my children to thrive in this virtual school? And how do I set appropriate limits for my child to support his or her growth? And when we're looking at these questions, it's like there's a theme here, right? A lot of it has to do with how like a parent wanting a tool or strategy that will actually work. And what I know to be true of the folks who are in my group is that you've already tried some things. So if this is you and you relate to one of those questions, one of those areas of concern, just go ahead and put into the comments right here in the Facebook group, or if you're joining me on Zoom, tell me like what is your big question or area that you would like to have support with, and what have you tried already? Knowing what you've already tried will really help me to be able to support you even in an even more robust way. It's something that I ask all of my clients and all the folks who take me up on the complimentary strategy sessions, all the immersion members who spend a year or sometimes 2 or 3 with me. I always say, what have you tried? And sometimes that alone can get you into a space of being more aware of not only what's happening, but aware of yourself. Like, how are you responding or reacting? What are some strategies that you already have in play? And then once you've shared what you've tried, I'd like to hear like, how is it going? Like how did your child respond to that strategy or tool that you tried? And maybe it's that you haven't tried anything yet and you're just trying to, you're just in the beginning stages of coming up with a plan. But I want you to know that, wherever you're at, I'm here to support you today. And part of that is going to be making sure that this has enough energy to keep going. Here we go. And one of the things that you'll be hearing me do today is I'll be giving specific suggestions based on the questions, but until I have more information, I can't quite go deep into it. So what's good about that and why this works as a Facebook seminar, kind of training to a whole group of like over 500 people, is that I'm able to just sort of generalize like practices that I've seen work really well with all different kids and all different sort of temperaments, different parenting styles, because there's no one way to do it, to get it right, friends. There's no one way. I'm going to say it again. There's no perfect way. There's no one way. There's no right way to, to make these strategies and tools work. As a matter of fact, I just want you to sort of lean into the possibility that there's something here for you and that you might be able to take something that you hear today and leave the rest and make it work for you and your kids. So let's dive right in. How do I win my child's cooperation instead of being a task manager? And I believe this is a question by, this is by Trey, and I'm just going to put his name here. What I love about this question is that, this came out of our strategy session. He was just really aware of the difference. That when you are a task manager, constantly monitoring your kids' activities, telling them what to do, kind of trying to keep an eye on whether or not they're doing it right, whether or not they're completing it, and you're having to kind of ride them or at the very least supervise them constantly. It puts a strain on the family system. And if you hear that, if you're here watching, I know I've got a few people live with me on Facebook, and you got a few folks probably hopping on Zoom in a minute here, or if you're just listening to the recording, let me know. What is it that, what is it that you've noticed happens when you're managing your kids too much and where you're just in manager mode? So you're not really able to, I don't know, for example, what can happen is you might not take in as much information about what's going on. And so you might come in kind of hot, right? Like, what are you kids doing? Why aren't you doing this? You could give up because you've repeated yourself so many times and you're just tired of it, not getting the listening that you want. I was in a session this morning where I was like, okay, we have a year together to work on anything. What is it that you want the most? They said, we want our kid to listen. I was like, I hear you, because they repeat his name 6 or 7 times. They'll say no, and he's like, I'll go do it anyway. So how do you win your child's cooperation? Well, for some of you, this will be a quick review, but I think it's worth going over again and again. And I have like these great clients who need to hear it several times before they really see their way forward with these strategies. The first one is to connect before you correct. I'm going to say it again. It's worth repeating. Connect before you correct. Now, if you heard that, put it in the chat, in the comments right now. Connect before you correct. Connection before correction. And why connection before correction? Because when you have actually taken the time to meet your kid where they are, you get to do a few things. First of all, you get to even see if they're paying attention. The other thing you get to do when you connect, before you give a bunch of instructions, that just goes whoosh, right? The other thing you get to do is take a moment to kind of just enjoy where they are and really see where their like energy level is, whether they're tired or hungry, for example, or thirsty, whether they're discouraged or something, there's some emotion coming up. If you take some time to connect first, you get to gather a lot more information. And then what you do next to sort of correct or to pull in their cooperation will be that much more effective and meaningful because you'll have more information. The other thing is that kids really like to feel seen and heard. I mean, who doesn't, right? It's a human need for us to be seen, heard, feel understood, to belong, feel loved, all these things. And when we kind of come in with something that feels like a correction, whether it's how many times I have to tell you, or it's, I can't believe you did that again, or, oh, you're spilling that again, whatever it is. If you take a moment to go, oh, I see this is happening, and kind of connect with them, everybody has a better time. And they do feel more seen, they feel more heard, they feel more understood. And at times you're in a pattern where they're just assuming you're going to tell them what to do, manager mode. You're going to basically give them feedback, which feels like their worst critic, or you're going to give them direction, which is like, you're bossy pants, right? You're being too much of the boss. Or like, this is how I get attention. I'm going to keep being this way so you can give me more attention. So they might be after power or attention or, avoiding you. And when we are running into that, and that's a pattern, like I had this one mom say that every time she would say her kid's name, he would go like this kind of, and she didn't notice it until we started working together. She was in the immersion, and this was like month 2, where she's like, what I noticed after that connect before you correct training is that my kid actually cringes when I say his name. And when I realized what I was doing is I would say his name before I would tell him either something to do, some kind of criticism or, correction, or just some other unpleasantry. So she started practicing saying his name and then connecting with him. Now there's a lot of ways to connect. So connect is kind of big, but the one that I love the most is getting into your child's world and showing some understanding. When you get into their world, they get a sense of like, oh, you're here with me. Have you ever seen a kid like just totally immersed in what they're immersed in and ignoring everything else, right? Well, they're hardwired to be egocentric and focused on what they're interested in. It's part of their developmental plane, and it's harder when they're younger. And even as they get older, though, that we were saying that our brains aren't really fully developed until 24 or even 28 when it comes to like basic executive functioning. I had this practitioner say, "Oh, the person you're talking about is 24." Well, my experience is that 24-year-olds can barely find their way out of a brown paper bag. So, there's something to that. So they are doing what they do, whether they're 8, 12, 15, or 2, they're in their own world. And so finding a way to get into that world with them is one of the best ways to connect. And it can look differently. It can be, wow, I've seen you pick up that book several times, what's going on in that story? Or when you're walking up to a kid who you want to come to either come to dinner or put their device away, maybe just instead of coming at them like, hey, do this thing, and they're like, I'll either push back or I'll ignore you, come sit next to them and look at what they're looking at. There's something that broadcasts really clearly to a child: I'm on your team. I'm interested I'm interested in what you're interested in, and I also would love for you to be interested in what I'm interested in. There's something really powerful about sitting side by side with a child, whether it's metaphorically or physically, like actually literally sitting next to them and looking at the same thing. So winning cooperation, I would say, get out of the task manager mode by connecting before you correct or before you manage, and gather their input after you kind of connect and see what they're up to. Even if it's just a quick question, like, hey, I was thinking of maybe we could have salad or we could do some steamed veggies tonight. Which one would you prefer? Like, what do you think? It could be something that simple where, you're making a decision in the kitchen of what you're going to feed the kids, and instead of just going for it, you like step over and you talk to them for a minute. So those are some ways you can win cooperation. There's a whole lot more, and I have a whole modules about it, but that's what I've got for you, especially Trey, who asked the question. So helping your child cope with social isolation, that's a really good one too. When I think of social isolation, I think of the pandemic and how our kids are not having those natural communities of peers right now. And it can be really tough, because we're thinking about, and this was Allison's question, I just want to make sure she knows. So yeah, this can be really tough because we know that they're missing that, and we can feel a bit helpless. Is anybody feeling helpless right now about being able to, bring in more community for your child? Or maybe you are, trying, but it's like you've had some discouraging moments with it. Well, what I've seen is that there are some really creative solutions, and it takes, though, not only some imagination and some curiosity, but some fortitude, some resilience of our own. Because what I've seen happen is that, and this is dozens of families, this is not just 1 or 2 cases. What I've seen happen is that parents will say like, oh, let's find a game app that my son can play with with his grandfather. And that way they can, have some fun and connect, even though grandma and grandpa can't visit for the holidays. So they do it once, they set it up, they make it happen, and then something doesn't go quite right. Like grandpa doesn't know how to log in, or, the first game they play is not that interesting, or your kid doesn't get into it right away, and they'll just put it down and kind of write off the entire genre of like maybe app-based social connection, where you can FaceTime and play a game at the same time, where there's like a bunch of apps out there. And if you know of one specifically that's worked for your kid, put it in the chat, please, the comments. Because I've experimented with a few, but I'd love to hear your experience. Let's help each other out. But so what I'm touching on, though, is that perhaps there have been some really good ideas in circulation, but you've given up on them a little too soon. And that because it's uncharted territory, you can possibly get more easily discouraged. And so for, parents like Allison, who have a 9-year-old stuck at home, a singleton, like a single child, need to start really leaning into getting creative about ideas of how to make it happen. Part of what you might also be looking for is are some other like-minded parents, and that also can take some persistence and resilience, because it can be hard to reach out for play dates even in non-COVID times. But now we have all these restrictions around or different varying levels of comfort and care that people are taking in preventing, germ exposure, for example. And so one thing that can be really helpful is getting really clear about your ask, So you could even draft it right now in the comments with me. something like, hey person, hey name, I'm exploring what it would look like to set up a regular get together with my son, with my daughter, with my kids, and their friends. You came to mind. Here's what I would need. And notice this is really different from a regular play date, right? It's like, hey, you want to do this or this, and when? It's like, here's what I would need. I need to know that I need to know that, I'm just going to make it up, and you get to fill in the blank here for yourself. I need to know that everybody, all the adults in your household, when they leave the house, are using masks in their places of work, especially when they're indoors, that we could commit to wearing masks and being outdoors for the get together, and that we could take turns supervising the kids so that we can also get a little break, through this sort of exchange. Would you be willing to have a conversation with me? And then instead of reaching out to one person, you reach out to 10 or 3, if that's a stretch already. Who comes to mind? And think of your natural communities, like your school community, your neighborhood, your extended family, your friends' kids, and consider doing a reach out. A lot of us have given up on this because it just seems like it's too hard, or there's a possibility of rejection or making someone feel awkward or whatever, because they're not meeting the same level of caution that you are. But I think we're kind of come to the point where we have to kind of get over it and just do it anyway. Kind of put any pride aside or any misgiving, some discomfort aside, and just reach out and see what happens. I've had several folks in my world, my parenting world, and in my personal life, persist through those obstacles. And they're so glad that they have this like weekly play date set up for their kid, even if it has to be through a fence, or they go outdoors, and like one family got a head to toe rain suit for his kid because it was the only way they were going to make the outdoor play happen during COVID, but they just did it. It was like worth it, So whatever obstacle you think you have, or that you do have, and that you maybe need to rethink in terms of social isolation, I really want you to, explore that and maybe challenge anything that you're assuming can't happen in these times. I've seen rainy day play dates with the kids in full suits. I've seen kids getting on like really, really sweet like story sharing type things, like their story time read alouds where they FaceTime on mom and dad's phone or something, and then on the tablet or on the screen they've got the story time going, and they get to like see their friend and like make faces and like laugh and things like that. Another thing is that if you have a child 8 years or older, ask them what they want, right? And I think you can start that conversation with, what was the best part of hanging out with your friends, before we needed to spend so much time at home? And listen for clues, right? So a lot of times we assume that, for example, girls want to chat and boys want to, do physical activity. Well, guess what? Your boy might want to chat and play like imaginative story making games, and your girl may want to go bike riding with another girl or another boy, or a boy, or someone who's they, them. You don't know until you really ask them and explore the topic with them. And I would even get out like a big piece of paper or like a whiteboard, something like that, or just, some scrap paper, maybe a little note and sticky notes, and just write down ideas and spatter them out and get into a brainstorming session with your older child. Kids also are feeling kind of stuck and unsure what to do. Another thing you can do is text 3 to 5 friends right now, or post up in the group here, asking, what are you doing with your 8-year-old right now to help them connect socially? Another great one I heard about was this Friday get together where the kids were all playing basketball at the local park on Fridays. And they would rotate because it was 3 households at a time. So they'd rotate, and they would actually do a tournament style where they would one-on-one, like they do a little one-on-one tournament, like best of 3 type of thing. And then whoever won got to stay, and then they got to play like the next people up, kind of like pool at the bar or something, dart tournament. And it was just a creative solution, right? And then the next hour, like that person would stay, and then the next hour, that hour would pass. The next hour, either the next week or the next hour, the other person would come and play the winner and get to find out who won. And it was just sort of a creative solution. I loved it. Another was a weekly mountain biking, you know, they're just doing a loop that the kids could do on their own. I think they were 11 and 12, and yeah, 10, 11, and 12, the kids in that group. And they would just go on a mountain biking, you know, loop where basically they like three households, 3 cars would drive to a spot. Kids would get out, do their loop. Parents could socialize with their windows down or go run an errand and come back while one stayed. And it was just this wonderful way to get some exercise, get outdoors, be with the friends. You know, and some of these things require equipment and stuff, but it doesn't have to, you know, it doesn't have to. It could even be like 3 kids like getting to walk to the corner store, buy a snack and come home, come back and eat it on the porch. Like it can really be like what's right there in your neighborhood. It doesn't have to be fancy. And the more you involve the kids on gathering input, the more likely they're going to be into it. If you heard something that was helpful, or if you have something to add, don't be shy. Like drop into the comments. Let us know what it is that you would like to add to it, or what interested you, something you liked. Always good to get some interaction. If you're here listening, it's always good to hear where you're tuning in from, how old your kids are, and if you also have a question for Ask Me Anything. What would you like support with right now? What's the hardest stuff going on? Okay, so the next 2 are really similar because they go hand in hand. How do I motivate my children to do their schoolwork virtually? And I think that was, let's see, see, that was, I'll have to look it up. I think that's Teresa. Yeah, so she was wondering what, I forgot to write the names down this week. It happens. So one of the things that, yeah, it's Teresa. I was right. Teresa Rosano. So sweetheart, you know, you were wondering about how to, you know, structure things and help them stay motivated, especially, you know, even though they have a terrific teacher and the older one is really hooked on YouTube. Like, how do you get them started on their work? How do you get them engaged? Really good questions here, Teresa. So let me just make sure you got this spot. So when it comes to structuring them and motivating them for their virtual schoolwork, there's several things you can do. With your age of kids, you know, you've got, you know, I think you have a 10-year-old, 2 10-year-olds and a 14-year-old. So they're at a place where they're probably logging into their Google Classroom, et cetera, like whatever their platform is, their Seesaw or whatever, and they're able to see their assignments and they're able to access that. And hopefully they've transitioned into being able to do that pretty well. What I'm guessing is happening is that, you know, they're just sort of getting COVID weary, getting a little worn down. They're maybe like kind of tired of like how it's not as interactive as it used to be. Perhaps they're, you know, missing the social aspect too. There's a lot of things that can break down when it comes to motivation. So I would want more information. And so I'll give you like 1 tip from each, but I just want to preface by saying like you and I could talk more about what you're noticing. And we could get you even more personalized support with this, Teresa. But so, and you say it's close to impossible. So I really want to hear about what that means. And you can drop a comment here, or we can do a message exchange. But Teresa, what I'm hearing is that when it's time to get started, it's like there's this pushback, especially with your older one. Yeah, so even getting started with his work is a challenge. So he needs to reconnect with why this work is even something that's worth doing. And sometimes we go straight to, well, it's to get good grades, to get into a good school, which is fine. But it might not be enough for your son right now. He might need a little more. So let's run through the iCare model. So the iCare model is something I developed when I was really looking for what would be a great way to share with parents what I've learned about motivation. And my background is 15 years of classroom time in motivating kids to get engaged in activities. A lot of times kids doing different things at the same time, up to 36, even 48 kids at a time. So I have successfully gotten kids, you know, 8, 9 year olds to engage in their work. You know, I also have advised teachers working with 8 to 12-year-olds. So how to get them engaged is really what you're asking, right? And I think that once they get started, it can make the rest of it easy. Like once you get the momentum going. So I have the I care model, but first I'd want you to ask, is there something else getting in the way? Are they hungry, angry, lonely, tired? It's an acronym called HALT. It's not mine, but it's a good one I've seen around and my parent clients use. And running through that with your 14-year-old to help him assess his own needs before it's time to get the work started. So let's say his homework block starts right after school or something at 4 to 6 before dinner. You could actually meet up with him at 3:45 and say, hey, hon, this is our check-in. What do you need to get done? Okay, got it. What do you need right now? Are you hungry? Are you tired? Are you feeling lonely and need to like chat up with a friend for 5-10 minutes before is there an assignment here you can do with a friend? Or something really, are you like in a grumpy mood and need to get something off your chest? Is there some anger we need to work through? And that's hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And when you give that tool to kids, especially teens, and you can, even if you have an 8-year-old or older, they can start to do this too. It's just like a self check-in where we all could use this during our doom scrolling times, where we check in with ourselves. Like, am I okay? Am I taking care of myself? Am I hungry? Do I need to eat something? Am I tired? Do I need to step away and take a 10-minute break and just close my eyes or like stare at a tree or something? Am I lonely? Has it been a while since I've had contact with another human being besides the people in my house? Oh, maybe I should call that friend or, send out that message. And then the tired one is really interesting because, even though you can take a quick break, it can also be like a meta question of, am I getting enough sleep? Am I doing a good job of getting off of screens at least a half hour before I go to bed? Is there something I need to do to adjust my bedtime or my caffeine intake? You get to really check in. So HALT, H-A-L-T, HALT. The other one is the I care model, and I'll just give you one of each. So the I care is interest, competence. I'm putting it in the chat, in the Facebook group, so you can see that. Competence, it's also autonomy. It's relatedness, which is sort of our connection piece we were talking about earlier, and effort, which is related to growth mindset. So when cooperation and or motivation is not going so well, a lot of times it's one of these 5 things or a combination of them that is too low. The interest is too low. The sense of like, I know how to do this, the skill level is too low, or it's overwhelming. I don't know how to do it all at once. It could be, listen for this, right? What might be true for your kid? Their autonomy is feeling too low, like they don't feel like they have enough choices built in, or they're not influencing or being able to give enough input. The relatedness piece is low. They don't get what the impact is, if it's a chore especially, or an apology or something that does have a big impact on others, or they're lonely, they need some company, or it's effort. And it's having to do with like, they don't believe that their efforts can actually cause the change that they want to occur. And so what happens is that they'll get stuck, and it'll show up as boredom and annoyance, or they might be complaining and whining a lot. They might be avoiding the task. They might say, this is too hard, or I give up. There's a lot of the ways that the kids will show us, or especially into our, you've got a lot of folks here with 8, 10, 12, 14-year-old, 15-year-olds even for this session. There's a lot of ways it'll show up. So we can actually hack our motivation, and this is something I've seen over and over again. And you can actually teach to your kids so they can self-motivate. So going into the interest, the key question is there a way I could make this more interesting? So it's time to get that work started and helping your 14-year-old get to the point where they're asking themselves, is there a way that I could make this more interesting? And sometimes when you're wanting to create structure to support kids with learning, and I think that question was, let me see. Oh yeah, let me see. I'll get that person's name up here too. That was Alana. Yeah, so sometimes when you're wanting to structure things for success, one of the things you want to look at is this motivation piece. Like, is there enough motivation in the very beginning to carry them through the task? So how do I make this more interesting is a real question. So could I turn it into a game? Could I do a race against the timer, see how much I can get done in 5 minutes? Could I start a competition with a friend? Hey, I want to do my math at 3. Will you do your math at 3 too? And we'll see who finishes the first 5 problems first, and then we'll compare answers, right? So when they're older, they can really structure that for themselves. And then when they're younger, we might be doing it with them or kind of helping them come up with their own self games. Another way to make it interesting is trying it a new way. So maybe like, oh, this history teacher always wants me to read the thing and do the thing. It's like, well, what if we just Google on this topic for a little bit first and see what's out there about this topic and see what we can learn on our own for a few minutes and see what your questions are. And then hop over to the video and see what, if the video answers your questions or not. Like that alone, like just this sort of like investigative approach can really inspire, like kind of spark kids up, because a lot of times the problem with virtual learning is that it's sort of this like canned session. It's like, here's your thing, you do this, and then you do this follow-up, you study this way, and then you show that you understand. But there isn't a whole lot of like of them in that, right? Like they're not getting to like put some input in or have some, curious question they're bringing in there. So maybe some self-research would be, some self-directed research first would be especially good for the older kids, 8 and up, and even younger, but you'll need to do a bit with them. Another one can be competence, looking at, is there a way to break this down into smaller steps that feel more achievable if it feels too big? If they're complaining, oh, it takes so long. Also, are there certain steps that they truly need support with and there's a little skill gap? I think of writing. Even 8, 10, and 12 and 14-year-olds can struggle with writing. We've seen it, right? Especially if it's like a multiple paragraph essay or a bigger project. And so breaking into smaller steps where it's like, okay, can we just do a brainstorming session for like the topic? And then you step away. Okay, can we come back now and write an outline based on the top questions we want to ask about this topic? Okay, great. And then next time, what resources do we have to answer these questions? Yeah. So like breaking like separate sessions or separate steps, and celebrating the completion along the way. Like, okay, great. Now that we know, some of our topic ideas, now we can figure out what we want to know about, we can pick a topic and figure out what we want to know about it. When you break it down into smaller steps, oftentimes kids just find it more manageable and approachable. That could be a thing that could be blocking your Teresa, your big one, especially from getting involved. And then maybe there's a step there that's hard, like truly hard, and your kid needs help and support with it. Like for my guy, he had a lot around writing, a lot of stuff around writing when he was in 4th and 5th grade, and even into middle school a bit. And once we realized that it was the physical writing part that was the most challenging thing for him to kind of stay focused on and organize, it was much better because we were able to say, okay, well, what if we talk it out first and take a bunch of notes that you can copy, or we could even scribe for you, because really the writing part, the physical writing part is not the point, it's the composition and comprehension that you're demonstrating. So when we shifted to that and made it more conversational, he enjoyed it a lot more. And he worked with a teacher that really understood that by the time he was in middle school. So competence, another one you can look at. Autonomy has to do with them feeling like they have enough influence or power. And sometimes with schoolwork, especially in high school, there's not a whole lot of choice, like I was saying. However, you could give them autonomy somewhere else. So maybe let them plan a meal and order groceries, and they get to say what everyone's having for dinner. Maybe they can choose the movie. Maybe they can, give them autonomy and choices somewhere else. And then in the schoolwork, when possible, also offer them choices. I mean, it could even be as simple as, okay, you've got science, history, and math. Which one do you want to do first? And how many problems do you want to do before you do like a walk around break? What do you think would be a wise number of problems? You've already given it back to them as if like, hey, I believe in that you can organize this and you can make good decisions, and you get to kind of choose your own adventure here while you're still taking care of it. Real quick, relatedness, we talked a bit about that already, but sometimes they don't understand, and this is not as much schoolwork because it's mostly it's about themselves. Are they developing themselves or not? But it turns out that, and I assumed this too, but I was watching my classroom, like really looking like, what is it that isn't quite going right? We had high interest, we had autonomy, we had competence, like lots of support and tools. We had, a lot of modeling of the next one, which is growth mindset. But I realized that, some of the relationships and just sort of, I don't know, kids were kind of clueless about what the adults in their life especially were doing on their behalf, right? Like the fundraising efforts at school and the administrators going out of their way to make sure that they had really great playground equipment and, parent volunteers as well, and even their own parents, their own teachers. And so I did a gratitude study where I brought in, just stories. I brought stories to their mind of people in their community who are going out of their way to do good things for them. And I helped them to realize that there's this like whole squad of people in their life that really want them to succeed and really want them to be happy and healthy. And even if it's not in a school, you don't have to be at school to say things like, wow, I wonder who sets up all these Zoom accounts and like find out the name of the administrator, or I wonder who's supporting your teacher, right? And getting the lessons and everything done. Did they have a student teacher? Oh, I bet that's really nice. What a great thing, that there are these people who are, why do they spend all this extra time on this lesson, like making this whole slide deck for you that you can go in and edit and everybody gets a copy? Like, why would they do that? Oh, I guess they kind of want us to learn something. Yeah, they do, don't they? They're taking the time to do that, especially you were mentioning a terrific teacher, Teresa. It's like, why are they doing that? Well, they really want us to succeed. Why do they want you to succeed? Well, maybe they're just like a really dedicated teacher, really passionate about kids. Like, why would they be passionate about kids? What's so great about kids? And you can kind of keep going with it until they start to realize there's a human being on the other end of the transaction. And then you can also encourage them to reach out to their teacher and connect outside of school hours. Sometimes teachers make themselves available for office hours. Also, you could even like write a little note like, I really appreciate how you created that slide deck. That really made it easier to be able to edit things rather than have to, create a new document. I really appreciate that. And just have them message out to their teacher. One gesture of gratitude can like amplify mood by up to 2 to 4 weeks sometimes. So it's worth exploring that one. It's a strong intervention. It works for adults too, by the way. So if you're not feeling so jazzed about your work these days or your studies, if you're a student, consider showing some appreciation for the people who are really rooting for your success. Yeah, even if it's just more global, like any student's success, even if it isn't you. Lastly, the growth mindset. So Teresa, and this is also for Alana, structuring in time to review past successes so that kids and teens can see that they've been here before and they found a way through it. And my gosh, have they made progress over time? Because a lot of times kids are too short-sighted. Like they don't see the cumulative effects. They're just too absorbed in what they would rather be doing, or this particular assignment and what's hard about it or annoying. So they're not always getting the fact that they used to be a baby and they couldn't talk, they couldn't walk. And then they learned how to talk and walk. And they learned how to form sentences. And then they learned letter sounds. And they learned how to read those letter sounds into words, put them into words. And then they learned all these words that you can't sound out. And then they read sentences, like it's amazing what they've actually done. And when they're older, the thing you can do, especially if they're 6, 7, 8 and older, is you can say, okay, when were you in a situation like this before? And what did you do to get through it, right? Whether it's emotionally or academically. Oh, you took 3 deep breaths emotionally, maybe. Oh, you took a break. Academically. Oh, you looked back on the assignment before to see how you did those problems. And then once you jogged your memory, you realize that these problems are just review. It's actually pretty easy. You went back to your notes that your teacher gave you, or you rewatched the video because it had been 3 days. Right, that's what you did 2 weeks ago when you got stuck like this. I wonder if that would work again. What it does is it gives them the sense of like, oh, I can build off of past successes and strategies and tools that really worked, and I can make them work now. And also, I'm a person who, when I put in effort with the right tools and strategies, I develop, like I get better, I improve. My abilities improve, my skills improve, even my personality improves, your character. It's true. We've figured out in the research that if you tell kids that they can do that and you show them examples of how they've done it in the past, they're usually pretty inspired to continue down that path. So it's quite a few things. There's only one last one that I'm going to address today. But again, if you're here live, I see a few folks are watching live on Facebook, or if you are in the Zoom room with me, I see I think Trey's here. Hey, Trey. Yeah, throw it in the chat if you have a follow-up question or something that really stood out to you that you don't want to forget. Let me know what it is before we wrap this session. Really great questions this month. I mean, and I had a hard time choosing. There were probably 8 more that were great, but similar. This last one is for Krista. Krista, setting appropriate limits with a 17-year-old. Anybody else have an older child who's here will appreciate this. Oh yeah, that's not how you spell limits. So limits are really a matter of getting clear and getting on the same team. So what if any limits are you perhaps not totally clear about? What happens is when you're not clear, then the kids aren't clear, and then the whole family system is unclear, and then there's a lot of conflict because you don't even know why you have the limit or what it is, and it just sort of comes out in these spurts, and then it's kind of unfair to them, to you, to everybody. So that's one thing you can look at, Krista, is like, have you done the hard thinking about when it's okay for your daughter to, for example, drive by herself and when she needs to have somebody in the car with her? Have you done the hard thinking of, oh no, who she gets to meet up with on her own versus with a known person, right? Like an adult or a trusted family friend. Have you done the hard thinking of what those limits are? And I call it hard only because these are sometimes gut-wrenching decisions because we just can always see the risk of giving too much independence or too much leeway. So that's one possibility, is that you've got to sit with some of those difficult questions instead of avoiding them and waiting for them to come up. Take some time to actually kind of pregame those areas and anticipate what some of those limits might be that you might need to set. If you have younger kids and you're listening, this also applies, right? Like, what are our limits about screen time? What are our limits about how we respond when someone asks you to do something? Is it okay to yell? Is it okay to just ignore it? Like, what are our expectations here? Do we expect a response? And if so, after how many reminders or how many times you say their name? Sometimes getting even that clear, like, I will not say your name more than twice, honey. Like, that's just it. And then you do and I'll do my part to make sure I have your attention before I give you a request or a reminder. But yeah, I'm not willing to repeat myself that many times. Like, when you get that clear, it really does help, because kids are constantly testing and experimenting. They want to know what the system is, how far they can take it, things, what they can get away with, right? The other thing that might be going on here, Krista, is that you have so many limits that they're hard to keep track of. And that's where you want to get into collaborating with your daughter and actually doing an audit of, like, okay, here are all the rules I've made up for you. Like, I have I think, are there any more that I've missed, right? And just get the whole list and go, which of these do you feel like maybe you've grown out of and you're ready to kind of take on as something that you're going to self-manage, that you don't need mom and dad to have their eyes on this, and why? And let her state her case. Like, how liberating. Like, when I was a teenager and my mom and I were butting heads, we had like 4 hard years, 2 in high school and 2 after. Man, what it would have been like if she had sat down and allowed me to weigh in on some things. And if she would just heard me out, not agreeing to anything necessarily, anything changing or her changing her opinion about things, but just being heard out would have been such a big deal. So that's another thing you can consider, Krista. Even for the younger kids, kids starting age 5 even get a really strong sense of what's fair or not fair, even if they're totally off base. And a last thought about fairness would be that kids often think fairness means same, like it should look the same. how come you get 3 pieces of chicken and I only get 2? Well, honey, my body is 3 times as heavy as yours, right? And so I need more food in it. Well, how about you eat your 2 pieces of chicken and we'll find out if you need a third one. And if you do, we can talk about it then. But they'll bring up that question because they actually think that what fair means is everybody gets exactly the same thing. You went first last time, now I go first, right? And sometimes they're right. And that is some good playground fairness, right? You've been on the swing for 5 minutes, now I get to be on the swing for 5 minutes. Totally, got it. And there's a lot of things in life that are not like that. It's not same. As a matter of fact, it's just about everybody getting what they need. Everybody getting what they need, even if that's not the same thing. So maybe little sister needs 2 hours of my time, of my attention during the day, and I only give you 1 hour. And that's because she's younger and she doesn't know how to even put her pants back on, after the potty. And having to explain that to kids over and over again can be a little tiring. So one thing you can do is like play some games where, like you can do like, let's say lawn bowling or something, and you take turns, like trying to hit down the pins, and you can say, hey, I've done this a lot. Like I'm also taller and my arms are longer. Do you think it's fair for us to do the same thing, like stand at the same spot and throw the same ball? Or do you think that we should maybe make some changes here so that it's more fair and everybody gets what they need? I mean, it seems like you need to be a little closer and maybe have a bigger ball. What do you think of that? Right? If you have twins, have one of them put a blindfold on and then the other one, do the game, and just see what the difference is when, when your needs are different. Like what might that person need? Oh, we might actually let that person stand right in front of the pins and try it from there if they have a blindfold on. And then they can take turns being the blindfolded one. It really brings to task like this idea of fairness. There's so much here to unpack, friends. I'm really impressed with all of you. Thank you for tuning in, and please do pass this on to others. I also recorded this in my public facing, Raising Our Resilience page. So it's shareable. If you wanted to hop over there, I'll put a link in the Facebook chat. Trey, you're here. Is there anything that you wanted to share? Last question before we wrap. I know that there's a few people watching as well on Facebook. Don't be shy. I've had like real success being able to coach people on the fly here. So if you have something, or if there's something you heard that you really liked, please let me know what it is so I can get a sense of what you got out of it. I'll give a minute for folks to do that. And I'm at an exciting spot in the year. I have a year-long immersion where I bring parents through, all 7 pillars of raising a resilient child twice throughout the year, starting in January and July. Every year I have a new cohort, and we're just about full. We only have 1 or 2 spots left. I just had a family put down a deposit today who's very seriously thinking of joining. And so if for some reason you just hear like, yeah, the call, like 2021 is my year to focus on parenting, reach out to me. Just message me directly if you're ready. You're like, I just don't want to keep repeating the same patterns of power struggles, or them not cooperating, me being in manager mode, them not, wanting to do their virtual learning, and I'm there prodding them. If you're just over it and ready for a change, like this is a very viable solution, and once parents engage in this mentorship process of like learning strategies and tools and being in a cohort that's moving together, like evolving and growing, you literally can't go back. Like I've had one of my clients who has been in the program since last July. She came to the January session and she's like, Vanessa, I have to tell you something funny. So what's that? I said, is it funny? She's like, I don't know if it's that funny, but it was amusing to me at the time. You could really tell who the new parents were versus the parents who've been with you for 6 months, because they just looked so much more stressed out and like really urgent about everything. And she goes, I remember what that felt like 6 months ago. And I'm so glad I'm on the other side of that. Like, I do not want to go back. And I'm so glad that I don't have to now. Like, you've helped us so much. Your program has helped us so much. Being with these other families has helped us so much. And we have made a commitment. She's talking about herself and her husband, that they are going to do it, right? Like they're going to address the ongoing, what do we do about screen time question. We are going to address the ongoing, we can't get our kid to sleep on their own and get to bed on time. We're going to address the lack of motivation to do the extra long projects from school. Like, we're going to do that this year. This is our year. So if this inspires you and you're like, holy cow, Vanessa, let's do it. Or at least you're very curious, you got to message me today or tomorrow, let me know. And that way we can get you started. We've got a welcome session this Saturday. So yeah, if that's you, let me know, please. Don't be shy. Okay. Message me or yeah, shoot me a comment. Just say like, hey, I'm interested right here, 2021. It's going to be my year. Okay. Make it really obvious. Tag me in it. Let me know because you'll need to grab my attention. So Trey's saying here, still looking for a helper. No luck yet. Seems to be a popular request in our community. Ooh, okay. Yeah. So parents here in this group, if you have teenagers who are 14 or older, usually is a good age, who wouldn't mind having a mentee. I've got a lot of parents here who have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds who would love for your kid, love to actually give your kid a gig and pay them hourly for them to meet up with their kid twice a week or, whatever interval works, to just sit with them and do some work with them as sort of a big brother, big sister kind of, setup. And I have several parents who have found a helper but their helper is now very busy. They're looking for a new one. Excuse me. I have a few parents who are looking for one, the first one, because it's just not working for them to lead their kid, for all of the virtual sessions. They just would love to have this resource, another wise voice in the mix. So if you are a parent of someone of a teen who could do that, please message me, let me know, or make it really obvious, tag me in the comments, because I've got some connections for you. And if you're seeking, let me know that too. And maybe we can do a little networking right here in our group. Trey, I encourage you to hop over into the group and put up your own post as well. Seeking teenage helper, teenage or young person helper, young adult to meet with my son X number of times to help him engage in his learning. He could really use a big brother or a big sister right now, kind of thing. Okay. Yeah. Let's network it out. Glad you're still on that, Trey. It's a viable solution once you get the person in place. I've heard it make a big difference. All right, friends, I went overtime today because there's so many great questions, so much to share. Lots of love to you all and your families. And I will see you next time. Next month is all about emotional mastery. We're going to dive into a bunch of strategies about how to build up self-awareness and self-regulation in our nervous systems, in our, emotional intelligence, but also how to pass it on to our kids. Usually it's Mondays at 2 p.m., a 30-minute training. If you show up live, you actually get live coaching too. So I highly recommend that you come, bring your questions, participate in the comments, and we can get you some support. Not the same as being in the big year-long immersion with a smaller cohort, but I'm just dedicated to this group of parents continuing on this journey of raising resilient kids. Whether you're here as a popping in, popping out person, or if you're here every week, we still love you. Keep showing up, and we'll see you next time that you're here. All right, take care now. Talk to you later. Okay, bye for now.